Look,
We're live?
I did see the
Wow,
you
I
didn't
didn't
see the
see it.
countdown because you're not looking at the screen. Okay. Welcome to the Future's Edge. I am Jim Urio. That's Bob Iacino. For those of you who've been watching our show a long time, you know we like to keep it about 65 to 75% on topics that are financial, economic, and trading. But those other shows, we branch off to things that we think are of value. I can make the argument quite easily that health and the health crisis we're in now in this country has a huge economic component of it. So the Future's Edge, take that future part, it might mean your future and your future health. That was good. I just came off with that up the hip, Bobby. Not bad,
Very
right?
good, Jimmy.
Anyway, thanks to our sponsors. Independence Arc Farms in Arkansas. Talk to Marco. He'll give you the great deal on grass-fed, grass-finished beef. It is absolutely delicious. Today I'm very, very excited about this show. Today, also, by the way, join us, Bobby and I, on unfilteredinvestor.com with our pal and partner Mike Arnold, where we talk more about trading, portfolio construction, things like that. Let's get to the meat of this. We have Dr. Philip Ovadia, who is a cardiac surgeon, who is the author of the book, Stay Off My Operating Table, and the founder of Ovadia Heart Health. Thank you so much for being with us, Doc. This is something that's so cool to me, what you do. But the first question I have to ask is this, is that every Monday, my wife and I intermittent fast. We go from Sunday dinner to Monday dinner with not any single calorie. So we are taping on Monday. So I'm cranky and hungry and tired. Is it worth it?
I would tell you it's worth it, but you shouldn't actually be cranky and hungry when you fast.
I'm cranky and hungry when I don't fast too, though,
Well,
to be clear.
then that I might not be able to fix for you. But when our bodies are working properly, fasting is part of our, human history. We always fast. One of the problems that we have gotten into that has caused our modern health crisis is because we don't fast enough. And we seem to never take a break from eating anymore. And that's a huge contributor to why we're in the mess that we're in, which, by the way, I agree with you completely. It's a financial issue, both on the personal and macro levels. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that.
No question about it. So to the fasting thing, as long as we're on that from the start. So is it just, from the Dr. Lufkin book, Lies I Taught in Medical School, we talk about autophagy, we talk about mitochondrial autophagy, mitophagy. Is that what are we talking about eating up damaged cells? Are we talking about hitting fat stores or both, or what's more important?
Yeah, so that's all part of it, but really at a more basic level, we're talking about your insulin level is really what's important here. Most people focus on or know about their glucose level, their blood sugar level, which is important, but related is your insulin level. And doctors don't know and talk about this enough. When you eat primarily carbohydrates, but really when you eat anything, right, your insulin level is going to go up some. And it takes a good 4 to 6 hours for it to come down. And what has happened, because we never go that long between meals anymore, that insulin level just stays elevated on a chronic basis. And that leads to something we call insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is at the root cause of most of the chronic disease that we face. It's certainly the root cause of heart disease that I've spent my career and every day battling against, but it's also at the root cause of many forms of cancer. A lot of the mental health crisis that we're suffering is due to insulin resistance.
By the way, I want to stop you right there because we're going to hit on that really hard later. The mental health part of this is something that nobody likes to admit. Sorry to interrupt you, Doc. Please continue.
No, big part of it. Chronic kidney disease, diabetes. You go down the list of the top 10 causes of death in the United States every year, and 9 of the 10 of them are attributable to insulin resistance. And like I said, one of the reasons that we become insulin resistant is not only what we eat, but the frequency with which we eat.
So I want to stay on the fasting thing for a minute. I have a different question, but you said you shouldn't feel hungry, you shouldn't feel cranky, and Jim, I can vouch, Jim is always cranky, so it doesn't even matter. But so last night I ate about 5:30. this morning at 5:30 p.m. This morning I got up about 5 a.m. I had to go to Miami because I was a guest on a trading podcast that was filming in Miami. And then I just got back and I hurried up now and scarfed down like just 2 plain burger patties before we did the show. So it ended up being a little less than a 22-hour fast. But when you said that, it struck me. My stomach wasn't actually hungry. It was just my mind telling me. Now, I've been basically doing a combination. Carnivore was deliberate, fasting became an accident. Is that typically how it happens? One of the things I struggled with on early carnivore, and I've been doing it almost 2 years now, not quite, is I felt full, but I felt like I was supposed to eat. What's going on between my mind and my stomach in that kind of a situation, in your view?
Yeah, we see this all the time. Carnivore is a great dietary approach. I'm sure we'll talk about it some more. And I'm sure it's also shocking to hear a heart surgeon say, go eat all the red meat you want.
Yeah.
But that is the truth, right? That is what is heart healthy, it turns out. And one of the advantages of a carnivore diet is it is so nutrient dense, right? That we are just hungry a lot less often. Understand that our bodies, the reason we eat, there's only one reason for it, right? We are looking for the nutrients that we need to fuel everything that goes on within our bodies. Our bodies don't sense calories. Our bodies don't really sense the difference between, carbohydrates and fat and protein, right? They're just looking for the nutrients. Now, it turns out that the nutrients are most prominent and most dense in animal protein and animal fats. So that naturally sort of leads us to a carnivore diet. Most people that go on a carnivore diet experience exactly what you experience. They start eating less often, not because they're trying to intentionally restrict themselves, but because they're just not hungry. And you also mentioned, right, what is hunger? How much of that is actual physical hunger versus if we just think it's time to eat, right? Because that's what we've been programmed to do. And we've gotten so far away, right? You just think back to your grandparents or great grandparents. They ate twice a day on average, the studies show us. Today, people consume calories on average 8 times a day. Think
Jesus.
about that. Either drinking or eating calories 8 times a day. You're asleep for 8 hours. Okay. That means that you're consuming calories every 2 hours. And that in and of itself has become one of our problems.
So just to follow up, and then I'd like to get on another subject, but I'll throw it over to Jimmy. When so I have friends, right? And they'll say something like, hey, let's meet for, whatever. Let's meet. Let's go out for a little while. Fine. They'll call me up. You done with work? No, I need another about another hour. And the friend will say to me, well, I'm getting a little shaky, so I'm going to go eat something. They tie that shakiness to the fact that they haven't eaten for maybe 3 or 4 hours. Is there a physiological thing that's actually making them shaky and it's something they should fight through? Because they say they're starving, but we all know they're not starving.
Well, yeah, so they have a problem, right? And their problem is that they are primarily running their bodies on sugar for energy. And glucose, sugar, is a quick burning, short lived energy source. And then when you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, like we typically do, and your insulin level is high, what happens is insulin blocks the body's ability to use fat for energy, right? Now think about this. Let's say let's say you're in good shape, right? Let's say you're 160 pounds and you are 6% body fat, right? Which is, that's going to be a pretty impressive physical specimen. You
You want
are
me to take my shirt off?
Yeah, there we go. Exactly. You're still walking around with about 30,000 calories worth of energy stored in your fat. Now, most people, right, are nowhere close to that, and they
Right.
literally have hundreds of thousands of calories stored in their fat. So why should we ever be hungry? The reason is because that insulin, that high insulin level that I mentioned earlier, is blocking your body's ability to use that fat. I always, the analogy I use is the gas tanker on the highway, right? And it's got that whole big tank filled with gas in the back, but it can still run out of gas, right? Because it can't use all that gas in the tank. And that's how our bodies are running when we're on a standard American diet with high insulin levels. And the sugar, which is the only thing we can access for energy, that needs to be constantly replenished. So they go 2-3 hours, they haven't eaten, that sugar level starts dropping, and the body starts sending out the alarm signals. We got to get something to eat.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Bobby, I do have one quick more question about intermittent fasting, and then I'll wrap it up.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So my program now is I try to do 16-8 when eating window every day, and then go 24 hours on Monday. What do you think the optimal intermittent fasting schedule is like in a normal month? Is mine optimal, or is there better?
Well, what I always tell people is optimal means that A, you can sustain it, and B, you feel good on it, and the numbers, right? The metrics are looking good on it, right? And it's kind of like, I'll turn that around to you, right? And just say, well, what's the optimal investment strategy for everyone? There isn't one. It's going to depend on where you're starting, where you're trying to go, what your goals are, and we have to take that all into account. So I would say your program is a pretty good one, right? For most people to kind of maybe start with, and then see how it's working, see where you need to adjust. If you're very overweight, right, and you're metabolically damaged, you might need even more fasting than that, right? You might want to make one meal a day your baseline, and then you might want to be doing, 36 to a 48-hour fast, every week or every other week or once a month or something like that. But, there's not one right answer for everyone. And the things you need to consider are, what fits into your lifestyle, what's going to get you to your goals, and where you're starting from.
And you guys, we're going to switch kind of our diet now too, but I wanted to add to the people watching too, is you guys know that I went on this intermittent fasting and mostly carnivore like 2 years ago. It has changed everything. I just did a triathlon with all the worst equipment that I ever had because my daughter set it up for me and she wanted to beat me because we had $10 bet on it. And I still did the best triathlon I've done in the last 20 years, and I'm 60 years old on carnivore. So Bobby's been more strict at carnivore at certain times. I've never been better than 70% of my calories from good fats and protein. And the good protein is usually animal, eggs, cheese, and then the 5 good fats, which I have and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, is olive oil, butter, animal fat, avocado oil, and then the last one, coconut oil. But anyway, of those things I just said, is my diet that's 70-30. I know it's better than the standard American diet. I just had this discussion with my niece today about what the shit that these people are eating. But do I lose a crap ton of the benefits because of those 30% that I still have carbs? Usually not processed carbs.
No, for someone like yourself who is very active, right, doing triathlons, carbohydrates can be a tool to utilize for that. And if you're not metabolically unhealthy, and we can talk about what that means, then you can tolerate, what I call clean, non-processed carbohydrates, right? Ideally coming from whole, real foods. Now, again, does that mean that that's the right approach for everyone? No, it doesn't, right? There are people who 30% of their calories coming from carbohydrates is going to be way too high. And this is where, an individualized approach, working with practitioners who really understand this stuff. And most doctors do not. I did not for, the first 2/3 of my career up until this point. Did not understand this. And, it is complicated, right? It's like finding a good financial advisor. Again,
I love the way you wind that back around to us. Nice job.
Yeah.
He's a professional.
There are lots of, there's lots of advice out there on finance, right? But how does it best apply to you, and what should your plan look like? It becomes a very personalized approach.
So I want to touch a little bit on what Jimmy said in terms of like differences in our diet. I think there's a big point to be made between the two of us. Jimmy and I have known each other coming up on 30 years, right?
Yep.
In one form or another. And Jimmy is much leaner than I am. And I am, I'd say bigger from a muscularity standpoint, but he's a lot leaner, right? I'm quite a bit stronger. Um, I was just, yeah. So, when you look at the perspective, like I stay strict because the second, number one, vegetables mess with my system. And that's as graphic as I want to get. And I think you know what I mean by that. I think the whole audience knows what I mean by that. Literally, I have the littlest bit of vegetables and it messes with me. Yesterday, my wife made a traditional bolognese, which has celery, carrots, onions, and then the balance of it is meat, a little bit of tomato paste. Unbelievably different restroom situation today than I would normally have, right? Um, is that my body trying to adjust to something new? Or am I the type who is just better off staying with meat, using fat as my energy source?
Yeah, I would say that probably points to that, fat animal proteins, right, are a better energy and nutrient source for you than the plants. And that is the case for many people. And, to varying degrees. Um, we can, look at this from many different lenses, right? The ancestral lens, where, again, for the majority of our existence as human beings, animal protein was our primary nutrient source, perhaps our only nutrient source for long periods of time, um, depending on where we were in the world and the seasonality and such. But ultimately, I try and help people develop a framework, right? I kind of focus on those systems, to borrow from Scott Adams. You want the systems, it's not about the goals. And, whole real food really needs to be our starting point. We can have the arguments about carnivore versus vegan. We can go down all the different, nutritional sort of dogmas that are out there. But the one most common success predictors, and I talk about this a lot in the book, is eat whole real food, right? If you're eating whole real food, you're going to be doing pretty good. Yes, there are unique benefits to animal proteins. They are way more nutrient dense than vegetable sources of nutrients. And that's important. And I think that's what pushes most people towards a animal-based diet ultimately. But there are lots of flavors in between, and this is where the individuality is going to come into play. There are some people who discover they basically need to be strict carnivore for various reasons. There are a lot of people who I would say fall into the category of mostly carnivore, with maybe a little bit of plant matter, and ultimately the people that feel best on a plant-based diet, they're usually just transitioning out of a highly processed
Highly
standard
processed,
American
right?
diet, and so they feel better for a while, but over the long run they start to run into some problems. That's been my experience.
Okay, so I want to transition to what you specialize in, if that's okay, Jim.
Sure.
We've had Dr. Sean Baker on the show twice. He was
Yep.
an orthopedic surgeon.
Yep.
He talked, ad nauseum. A few people don't believe him about joint and bone inflammation and all these kinds of things already. I can't help you. We've had Dr. Lufkin on, who wrote The Lies I Taught in Medical School. So we had someone who taught in medical school, echoing the same thing as you. Jimmy, what was the mental health? Dr.
That guy was
Shear?
great. Dr. Brett Scher, Metabolic
Dr. Brett
Minds.
Scher.
They just
That's it,
treat
Dr. Brett Scher.
mental illness with
Yep.
keto. But anyway, yeah.
Right. So more about, getting away from process, moving more toward animal based. Your specialty is the heart. Okay. So I have gotten several friends and family members to at least try this particular approach, mostly because I wanted them to A, lose weight, and B, get rid of some of the pain that they were feeling, which that was my direct experience. Is the second I got into carnivore, lost lower back pain, lost knee pain, and lost 40 pounds. Now, some people say to me, well, you lost a lot of weight. That's obviously why it hurt. I mean, I don't care. I'm not a why person. I'm a what person. I lost the pain, right? I can lift weights pain free again, which I haven't been able to do since my 20s. But your specialty is the heart. And the thing I get from everybody, regardless of how many, currently available statistics I show them, Jimmy, the thing that got me to switch is I found a statistic and then I verified it that in 2019 in the Chicago area, okay, 75% of the people who went to the emergency room with a heart attack diagnosed later had cholesterol below 200 via statins. Okay. And I was like, okay, something's wrong here because I have what the medical community calls high cholesterol, doctor. Now, everyone to a person that I've got to try this say, yeah, I feel better and I'm losing weight, but my cholesterol, man, it's going through the roof. What is your version of the cholesterol myth if you think it's a myth?
Yeah. So my version basically comes down to we don't, and by we, I mean doctors, don't understand cholesterol properly. And this has, the story around cholesterol has been simplified, right, to focus on one number, your LDL cholesterol level. And if your LDL cholesterol level is lower, you're doing great. And if it's higher, you're going to die from a heart attack, right? That's the narrative. And doctors, believe that, right? And that's the way that they practice medicine. And we can talk about why that is, but not important right now. What your audience needs to understand is it's not that simple. LDL cholesterol is not all bad. There is some bad LDL cholesterol. It's what we call small, dense LDL cholesterol. It might also be called oxidized LDL cholesterol. But what that basically means is that that LDL cholesterol, which is meant to be a beneficial thing in our bodies, has become dysfunctional. And it's become dysfunctional because of a lot of the things we alluded to earlier: insulin resistance, inflammation. These cause the LDL to become dysfunctional. And now we start to see that dysfunctional LDL contributing to disease in our arteries. But the disease in our arteries is not driven by high LDL. It's driven by insulin resistance, inflammation, which causes damage to our blood vessels. LDL is intended to be a repair mechanism for that damage that gets done to our blood vessels. And like I said, it's only
That's
when
fascinating.
the LDL becomes dysfunctional that it becomes problematic. Now, the problem is that most doctors don't measure the test, right? Don't do the tests that show us whether or not the LDL is dysfunctional. It's actually a simple blood test. It's called an advanced lipid panel, or it's going to be called a NMR panel. You might hear it referred to. And if your doctor does do that and does know how to interpret it, now we can find where this high versus low LDL starts to break down. And it can break down in both directions, right? Someone like yourself on a carnivore diet who has what's considered to be a high LDL, most of the time when we check your subfractions of your LDL, we find that most of your LDL is the large, fluffy or large buoyant LDL that is not problematic. And therefore, we don't have to worry about your LDL. Now, most of the patients on statins, they have low LDL levels, but most of the LDL that they have is that small, dense LDL because they are insulin resistant. They do have inflammation. And in fact, the mechanism by which the statins work, they disproportionately lower the large LDL and leave more small LDL behind. So those patients, despite their small LDL, right, and the study that you referred to and many others have showed this, that people with heart attacks come in with low LDL levels, but they have this mostly dysfunctional LDL. And that's what leads them to the emergency room and to my operating table ultimately.
Now, will you go so far as to say the whole statin thing is a profit-driven scam that's driven by pharmaceutical, or is that just me saying that?
I would not disagree with you. We'll put it that way. Yeah. I mean, it is not treating the root cause of the problem, right? And the evidence around it shows us how ineffective it is. And over the long run, it can actually make the problem worse. I am not a fan of these medications. For people listening, right, that doesn't mean go stop them. It means what I tell people is you want to get your body into a state that these medications are not going to be beneficial to you any longer. And that means having plenty of the large, non-damaged, well-functioning LDL around.
So I want to, I'm sorry, Jamie, I know I'm jumping in again, but
No, I
like
love
this
it.
is my personal experience has to do with your specialty. And I say that because okay, I was diagnosed with acceptable cholesterol when I was probably 18 or 19 years old, and it was 220. So I'm 59. I remember when they went from 200 to 300, right? And I actually spoke to a guy today who had a medical background, but he was working with the podcaster who was interviewing me this morning. And he said, we were talking about this because I told him we were going to talk to you. And he said, well, the reason they ramped it up from 200 to 300 was that they got more data. And they decided that it was or I'm sorry, brought it down from 300 to 200. I apologize. I had that backwards. He says, because they got more data over the years and they realized that more people needed it down below 200. And I have a family. Every single person that I ever saw take a cholesterol test had high cholesterol. There were 0 heart attacks in the entire family tree going back to my grandparents. But then later on in life, my mother had a valve replacement and bypass. She went to her regular doctor. He could not find a pulse on one side. They rushed her to the hospital. They did everything, but she still didn't have a heart attack. They were like, oh, you were going to walk in one day dead. So they did this. Now, I don't blame the doctors. I've said that multiple times on this show when we've had health experts and people who are interested in this same subject. I don't blame the doctors. But when they first prescribed me statins, I took them for about a month, had tons of body pain, stopped taking them. My doctor dropped me, said that they wouldn't allow me to be a patient if I wouldn't take their advice. Okay, fair enough. Went years and years and years, came down to Florida, got another doctor. He prescribed me the statins. I told him my experience. And I said, look, if I feel body pain again, I'm stopping, right? Felt body pain again, stopped. Haven't told him yet. I just dumped the pills and I refilled the prescription because I need to have a doctor. So what kind of a pushback have you gotten saying some of the things you're saying as a heart surgeon when you're theoretically trying to ruin your business, right? Because you actually care about patients. You don't want to operate on them. You want to lower the amount of operations you're doing. What kind of a pushback have you got from the medical community who maybe just disagrees with you, not because they want to be difficult, but because their experience is these are the studies we read and we follow what we read. And we're not going to do any more research.
Yeah. So, where I would push back is, I do blame the doctors because the doctors aren't thinking for themselves.
Okay.
And the doctors, and listen, I can tell you from my personal experience, right? We don't read the studies. We get the headline, right? We get the headline from medical societies that have become corrupted by the pharmaceutical industry, or we get the headlines directly from the pharmaceutical industry. And that's a big problem. And not enough doctors are thinking about this. And not enough doctors are sitting there thinking like I finally did. And again, admittedly, it took me a while to wake up to this, right? Why am I 20 years into my career as a heart surgeon? And like you said, 3/4 of the patients that end up on my operating table are on these medications that are supposed to fix the problem. And yet they're still ending up on my operating table. Right. And, the sad reality, the pass that I give the doctors is this: they're too busy to think about it. Right. The system doesn't want them thinking about it. It's just, follow these guidelines. Don't question these guidelines. Don't think about the guidelines. Don't think about the fact that they're failing. Right. And this really became the biggest driver for me. We've had these medications. We've suggested the low fat diet, right? These dietary changes now for 50 plus years. And heart disease has not gotten better. It has gotten worse, and it remains far and away the #1 killer. So, you started that by talking about, well, the guidelines changed because they got more evidence. And here's the problem. The evidence that they got was that the guidelines weren't working. Right? Lowering patients' cholesterol levels to 300 wasn't preventing
That's really
heart
interesting.
attacks. And so they said, well, that just means that we have to lower it even more. Let's go to 200. Let's go to, when we're talking about LDL levels now, many of the guidelines recommend LDL levels under 70. And we have no evidence that that is improving things any more, but it's just trapped. The system is trapped in this circular way of thinking that if the recommendations we are making aren't working, it must be because the recommendations aren't severe enough. They can't think that maybe cholesterol, or at least as they measure it, LDL cholesterol broadly, is not the problem. And that's where our system has failed. And that's where I now recognize that every patient that ends up on my operating table is a failure, not that patient's failure. The system has failed them, because heart disease is preventable. And
so tell me this, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
About markers? Because I 100%, the LDL thing, every bit of research I've done has said the same exact thing. Some of the smartest doctors know that. But let's talk about plaque and plaque scans, and then let's talk about triglycerides divided by HDL, which is Doctors Means, Casey and Callie, their measure. What do you think is interesting about those measures?
Yeah, so the reason that triglyceride divided by HDL is promoted by lots of doctors, is because it is an indirect indicator of insulin resistance. Now, it's not a great way to measure it, to be honest. There's racial variations in this. If you're on statins, it throws it off. So it's not my preferred way of measuring it. But if, like most patients, the only thing you've ever had checked is a basic lipid panel, it can at least give you some indicator of that there might be a problem brewing there. And specifically, you want your triglycerides divided by your HDL to be less than 1.5, ideally. Some people say less than 2. I think that's actually too broad of a measurement, but less than 1.5. You can be fairly assured that you are not insulin resistant. Now, even better, ask your doctor to order a fasting insulin level for you. If your doctor won't order it, go order it yourself. Here in the US, in almost every state, you can order your own labs, various websites to do that. A fasting insulin level will probably cost you somewhere between $8 and $12 to do. And now you can actually see what's going on with your metabolic health. Are you insulin resistant? If you have a high insulin level, which when you're fasting is anything over 8, you are likely insulin resistant. And that is going to mean that you probably have more of the small, dense LDL that we're trying to avoid. That means that your blood sugars are probably chronically running elevated. That means that you're doing damage to your blood vessels in your heart, in your brain, in your kidneys, in your eyes, everywhere. And that's what's driving all the disease that we're suffering from.
Okay, so I want you to help me with my social disclaimer. One of my greatest fears in life right now, since I've become sort of a ruminant animal diet advocate, right? Almost an evangelist, is that one of these days I'm gonna have a heart attack. Do you guys remember Jim Fixx?
Sure.
The marathon runner who was talking about it was great for his heart, and then he died of a heart attack on a run.
Sure.
Yep.
How long does it take, if I'm wrong about meat, to erase some of the damage I did in my prior life eating jalapeno poppers and Chicago style hot dogs and all that other stuff, Jimmy bags of double cheeseburgers on the trading floor, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How long does it actually take to build up damage to your heart? And then how long would it take to actually, it's not reversible, right? How long? So if I died of a heart attack tomorrow, it's not because I've been on carnivore 2 years, right?
Correct.
That's what I'm trying to explain here.
Yeah, exactly. Now, we can measure this, we can track it, and everyone should be doing this. Again, if you're a man over 40, if you're a woman over 50, you should have already had what's called a coronary artery calcium scan.
Had that done.
Simple, non-invasive test. You can attribute to this, right? It probably cost you $100 or less to get it done.
It was exactly $100 in Florida.
Took 5
Jimmy,
minutes.
Illinois probably won't let you do any of this. Go
Yeah,
ahead, Doc.
they didn't need to put an IV or anything in you.
Nope.
And it showed you whether or not you had this disease building up in your arteries. And people should be getting that test done, and then they should be following it over time. You know, the plaque is somewhat reversible. But
Oh, that's new to me.
in order to reverse it, the first step is you got to stop doing damage. You got to stop building new plaque. And, you know, carnivore diet is a great tool to do that. Any diet that improves your insulin resistance ultimately is going to lead to that. And so that's what we should be focused on. And that's how we should be tracking it, right, with the CAC scan. So again, we have multiple levels of problems with the system that lead to heart disease still being the #1 killer. We're focused on the wrong metrics. We don't follow the right metrics, and we don't address the disease until it becomes a problem. The vast majority of people find out they have heart disease when they have a heart attack or when they start developing symptoms like chest pains and shortness of breath. Yet we have this simple, inexpensive, easy to do test, right? That doesn't get used. It would be like telling women, you know, don't get mammograms because we don't want to know if you have breast cancer early. When you have a big, you know, tumor in your breast or it's spread all throughout your body, okay, that's when we'll deal with the breast cancer, right? That would be insane. And yet that's essentially how we treat heart disease in this country today.
So I had that calcium score done, Jimmy, and this was interesting to me because I had 0 calcium in most arteries. Then in one artery, I had what they called moderate. And the doctor said to me, the doctor that I'm lying to about taking statins now, he said, okay, it's good. You're not at much risk right now. So we want to keep you on the statins. That agitated me. Really, it really did. So when I look at it from that perspective, again, any damage I've done, certainly I've certainly halted that damage as I've gone off sugar, gone off processed foods, and really have moderated alcohol, which was the next thing I wanted to ask you.
We're going to get to that part.
I know. I haven't quit, but I'm so much less than I used to be. Dr. Ovadia, alcohol, please.
Yeah, we can talk about that one. The last thing I want to say
Be gentle.
That CAC scan is, you know, now you should be planning on getting a follow-up scan, right?
Okay. What's the time?
You know, if it was not 0, I would tell you get another scan in a year, right? And that's pretty aggressive. But you know, you want to know, right? You've been doing this carnivore diet thing for a couple of years. You've been making these changes. Is it working or not? Is it slowing down and ultimately stopping that progression? And why not track it, you know, when we have something to track it, right? You know, again, you know, getting back to the financial analogies, you know, you wouldn't tell someone not to look at their account balances for, you know, 3 or 5 years at a time, right? We want to know, is what we're doing working or not working? And the good news is that, you know, there are doctors that understand this, right? And, you know, you can find a different doctor to work with that understands this and can help you. Now, you know, you mentioned again the statins, and the problem is that statins increase coronary calcium scores. They have consistently been shown in these studies to increase calcium scores faster than patients not taking statins.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, you know, and neither has your doctor, by the way, but the studies are out there. And there's, you know, and when you ask the sort of, you know, what are considered the leading, you know, lipidologists, cardiologists about this, they'll come up with this convoluted argument that what is happening there is you're taking the soft, non-calcified plaque that you don't see on the coronary calcium scan, and you're converting it to calcified plaque, and that's stabilizing that plaque, so it's less likely to cause a heart attack. But that again goes against the evidence that the higher your calcium score is, the more at risk of a heart attack you are. There's just this sort of, they back themselves into this thinking that high calcium scores when you're on statins are okay, but high calcium scores when you're not on statins are a problem. And it's just, again, one of the places where this whole narrative starts to break down. I forgot what your question was.
Alcohol.
Oh yeah, alcohol. Okay. Very good. So, alcohol is a toxin, right? We can't get around this. And it's interesting, when we look at the ways, so most people don't realize, right? Alcohol is an energy source as well to our body. Our body has three, main energy sources that it can work off of: alcohol, sugar, and fat. Ketones are the way that we mobilize fat for energy. And our body will burn through those calorie sources by going from the one that is most toxic to us to the one that is least toxic, right? So alcohol gets burned first, then sugar, and then fats. So the problems with alcohol when it comes to metabolic health are there are a couple of them. Number one is, when you have alcohol in your system, you're going to burn that alcohol first, and then the sugar and the fat that's in your system is going to end up more likely to go into storage because it's not getting burned. That's problem number one. Problem number two is, many of the ways that we consume alcohol, it has a lot of sugar with it, right? We put mixers, or it's a high carbohydrate alcohol to start with. And so now we're bringing sugar and alcohol in together for our bodies to deal with. And number three is, most of us make worse choices as to what we eat when we're drinking alcohol. And you're more likely to go for those high carb, snack foods, right, that are so ubiquitous in the bars. And those are why I encourage people to drink less alcohol.
I will say this, though. One good thing about making bad decisions is my wife made a terrible decision while drunk to go out with me 36 years ago. So it can work out. Right?
Yeah. Now, listen, I'm a realist. I tell people you want to live your life. And if an occasional alcohol, consumption is going to help you enjoy your life better, okay, let's do it in the least damaging way. Let's pick a non-carbohydrate alcohol. This is going to be something like, vodka, scotch, tequila. Let's not mix it with sugar. So, have it straight up, have it with soda water if you want. And just, don't drink it to the point that you're then starting to make worse choices around your food and things like that.
Is bourbon the worst one because it's corn based?
No, bourbon is actually a decent, it's not a carbohydrate alcohol, so bourbon, scotch, like I said, tequila, vodka, gin, these are zero carbohydrate alcohols. And if you want to drink that, like I said, either mixed either straight or mixed with club soda, and you want to have one, maybe two at the most, on an occasional
every
basis.
hour.
Yeah.
Right. No.
For people who want to know, that was about the 42-minute mark where Dr. Ovadia said that. So
yeah, one of the interesting things about this that you may have noticed, right? When people go on low carbohydrate diets, they oftentimes notice their tolerance for alcohol drops significantly. And one drink, right, has the effect that 3 or 4 used to have.
Saves you money.
Yeah, exactly. You become a cheap date. And, and so again, you tend to more naturally moderate your alcohol intake as, when you're doing low carbohydrate diets, I find.
Okay, so it is 43 minutes into the program. So I want an attaboy for not mentioning cold plunge up until this time. And for everybody who's watching going, Jesus Christ, with the cold plunge again, zip it. I'm going to ask about cold plunge. Okay, I am a cold plunge enthusiast. I have been for about 2.5 years. One of the things I love the most about it is I believe, and I'm going to push this to you, that it is completely fires up my metabolism. It makes me like starving, particularly when like this morning, I cold plunged, then did a leg workout afterwards. And this is my fast day as well. And then I just want food. Are you into cold plunge? Are you a proponent of it? Be broad.
Yeah. So, there has been some evidence that exposure to cold can stimulate our bodies to make something called brown fat. This is a different type of fat that is more metabolically active than our usual, what we call yellow fat. With that being said, I am not convinced that cold plunge is uniquely beneficial to us. I don't think it's harmful, although, like anything, it can be overdone. I think one of the best benefits of cold plunge is if you can basically train yourself to tolerate cold plunging, you can do other hard things in life, right? And that may be one of the benefits to it. You know, I, I I guess, not really an opposite, right? But sauna,
I do
does,
sauna too. Yeah.
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 So sauna has very good data behind it showing that it lowers blood pressure, it lowers cardiovascular risk, you're sweating, you're detoxing. There's actually a lot of robust science to support sauna. Cold plunge isn't as well studied. Doesn't mean that the evidence, doesn't exist for its benefits. And I tell people if it's something you want to incorporate, go ahead. I think it can be beneficial. It's not something I put real high on my list, but it almost becomes okay. We've gone through all of these things. Let's add this now because we want to just keep doing better and maybe harder things. Is where the evidence, where the benefits come from it.
So, Dr. Ovidia, you have a service, and I'm not bringing it up as a plug, but I'm bringing it up to ask you a specific question. Tell people what that service is real quick.
Yeah, so it's pretty unique. I have a nationwide telemedicine practice where I help people stay off the operating table. And I have a fabulous team that works with me, nurse practitioner, health coaches. And like I said, it is all telemedicine. It is all 50 states. We even see people internationally. So, you're not unusual, right? That you mentioned that you're struggling to find a doctor that knows about this stuff and is aligned with your goals. And one of the parts of the mission that I'm on is to make it easier for people to connect with practitioners. And there are lots of good ones out there. It's just, a little bit of that needle in the haystack. So the approach that I've taken is, like I said, nationwide telemedicine, and certainly welcome anyone to come check us out and see if we're right for you.
Okay,
Can you
so,
give
and
it
Jimmy,
website?
yeah, go ahead, Jimmy. What is it?
No, I don't remember what it was. I was told I
Yeah,
wrote it down,
so
but I
just
can't
go
read my
to
writing.
you can just go to ifixhearts.com to find out about the practice. You can hit the talk button, set up a call with my team. I do have a bonus for all of the listeners here. If you go to ifixhearts.com/futures edge, you're going to be able to download stay off my operating stay off my operating table, the whole book for free. And I want people to have this information. And then, like I said, if you want to come see if working with my team is a good option, you'll be able to do that as well.
There's something
No,
that Bobby
so
hit on.
I'm
You go.
sorry, Jimmy. There's a reason that I asked that, and
Oh,
people
good.
should know we don't get paid there. That's just a bonus for you guys. That's really the way we prefer it. Um, the reason I ask you about this service is you obviously talk to people about their nutrition. That's not a stupid assumption of me, right?
Yep.
So again, I've mentioned, and Jimmy has too, that we've both sort of become advocates / evangelists for this type of dietary plan. I get very similar complaints from nausea to bathroom troubles in the first few weeks of people switching their diets to this type of a diet that I do. Is that consistent with what you hear? And what are the reasons for these kinds of things? One of the nausea not solutions, but explanations I came up with is somebody who's been high carb, whole grain crackers, plants, that kind of a thing. Uh, Starts taking in a lot of animal fat, and there's an adjustment period, whether it's okay. I'll let you finish because I get gross and I don't want to get too gross here.
Yeah. Ultimately, whenever we make major shifts in what we're eating, right, our body needs to adapt to that. The you know it just you're transitioning between um, your fuel source, which leads to one problem, and then our microbiome, right? The bacteria that are in our intestines that actually do a lot of the processing of the nutrients for us, right? Those are shifting when we shift what we're eating, and so it can have some of the effects that you mentioned. Now, these are usually manageable and they're usually short term. Um, but this is where working with a good practitioner becomes important, because if they understand that and can help you through it, right, they can get you through it. Whereas doctors who maybe have some inherent bias against doing things this way, they'll say, oh, you see, it's not working, stop doing what you're doing immediately, and won't be able to help you kind of get through that transition period.
And that's why I brought it up, Jimmy. I mean, you have the same experience where you tell people, hey,
Sure.
try this, it might work for you. And they're like, oh, I was getting nauseous or I was getting constipated, so I quit.
Yeah.
It's just like Tiger Woods with his golf swing, right? It gets worse before it gets better.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
of course. Yeah.
exactly. And some people misunderstand those changes and think they're getting worse, right? So you mentioned constipation. This comes up a lot. When you're eating a nutrient dense diet, a carnivore diet, let's say, your body is using the vast majority of what you're eating. There isn't a lot of waste to be disposed of. And so people start moving their bowels less often, and they interpret that as being a problem because, again, we've just been programmed, right? On the standard American diet, you usually move your bowels, at least once a day, if not a couple of times a day, because our bodies can't use so much of what we're eating. And so then you go to a carnivore diet and you start moving your bowels maybe a couple of times a week, right? And that doesn't mean it's unhealthy. It's just a different way that your body is now working. And I would say it's a better way. So all too often we misinterpret what is actually improving as being a problem.
That's amazing. By the way, I'm going to ask another question about fermented foods, but before I do, ifixhearts.com/futures edge. You can get the book, Stay Off My Operating Table, for free. You can download it right there. Please do it. Please take care of your health. Let's talk about fermented foods. I try to eat sauerkraut probably 4 or 5 times, probably a week, maybe almost once a day. Put a little olive oil on it, put a little pepper on it. Do you believe fermented foods help balance microbiome, all that thing?
Yeah, I do. I don't think they're essential, but I think they can be a good tool. And the caution is making sure that it's actually fermented. Again, this is one of the places, right, where our food industry has stepped in, and they'll call something sauerkraut, and it's really just cabbage soaked in vinegar, as opposed to a true traditional ferment that's going to get those beneficial bacteria that can then help the microbiome. So that's one note of caution around fermented foods. But in general, it's interesting. Fermentation is actually one of the ways that our ancestors developed to detoxify these plant products, right? And they may not have fully understood why they were doing it, but they just recognized that some of these things, you can't eat, right? You can't just pick them right out of nature and eat them. They are actually toxic. And fermentation became a way of detoxifying these things. Fermentation can also, the bacteria that are doing the fermenting, right, they're eating the sugar. So it makes it less sugar in some of these things. And these are why fermented foods can be beneficial to us.
That's amazing. Bobby, should I play us out?
I just want to do one more thing here
Sure.
because it's very difficult for people to understand. I did this, I started this for vanity, right? And then I became much more entrenched in the heart health side of it, because people were starting to tell me, yeah, how's your cholesterol? How's your cholesterol? So I started sort of researching it. I want to show this because with Jimmy, you can't tell. Jimmy went from 8% body fat to 4% body fat, right? So unless you actually are living with him and seeing him, you don't realize that he got healthier than he already was. He was already a healthy guy, right? I wasn't. So this actually is a picture of me pre-carnivore and post. Okay, I got to find it. Here it is. This is same clothing, okay? This is the same clothing, pre-carnivore and post. My wife happened to see me in what I was wearing, and she said, I think I've got a fat picture of you in those same clothes. And she posed me in the right-hand picture. Okay. The other one is what I look like when Jimmy knew me on the trading floor in Chicago.
Yeah.
Right. So this is pre-carnivore and post-carnivore.
Is there any way you can
And
change the face up? That's what's really killing me on these pictures.
it's crazy. And there's no Photoshop here. It's just pick collage to put them side by side. And again, this is not me showing this to say, look, you can do this too. We're trying to sell you a package of it. We're not selling you anything. This is something where I wanted you on the show and Jimmy wanted you on the show to explain to people from a heart surgeon's perspective, not from two idiot traders that drank too much and ate too much. And now we stopped drinking too much and eating too much. And again, Jimmy's always looked similar to how he looks right now. I did not. And it comes from what you preach to people, doctor. And I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, well, thank you. And, I very similar, right? And people can go and find it. I have my before and after pictures, right? This all started for me because I was such an unhealthy heart surgeon. I was morbidly
You
obese.
see that a lot in the medical profession, don't you?
I was pre-diabetic and I was headed for my own operating table. And what I realized was I didn't know how to fix it. And that's how this all started for me. And now I'm on the mission to help other people, avoid the operating table. So anything we can do to further that along, thank you for having me on, for allowing me to speak with your audience, and hopefully we'll keep them off the operating table.
Bobby,
One
you got
thing I
one more?
wanted
You
to
want me
say
to play
before
something?
Jimmy, before
Yeah,
you
go.
played us out, our good friend Widge just put up on Twitter. He obviously already went to the ifixheart.com/futures edge and he posted it on his Twitter. So third
Awesome.
gen widget, if you can't find it for some reason, if you type it in wrong, he put it up on his Twitter. And obviously we're live on Twitter, live on Rumble, live on YouTube, and this will be played over and over again but for people. So again, we're not getting paid.
Yeah.
We're financial guys. We just want you guys to feel better.
When we're definitely not getting paid, but when Bobby said we're not interested in that, no, I am interested in getting paid for things, just to be clear.
Fair enough. Not in this case.
We're not getting paid on this. I think this has been an unbelievable discussion and has helped me immensely. And I hope it has for you guys too. And remember what we believe, we're not trying to find necessarily people who go outside and color outside the lines. But what we fully believe is that there are systems that have corrupted the medical field to a certain extent. Not every doctor is corrupted and most everyone gets into it for all the right reasons. I'm not trying to bash them, but there are forces that funnel them into statins and different pharma drugs. And there is people in that field who step outside the lines and say, wait a second, let's do our own thinking and let's do our own research. And for that, our hats off to you. It is fabulous to talk to you. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Independence Arc Farm. Oh, what a tie-in this is. Eat more meat. Marco sells the best meat. Independence Arc Farm. Go on it. He doesn't give us any money either. He gives us steaks, which is even better than money. Particularly
better than money, especially now.
Now that cattle charge going right through the roof. But anyway, this is the Future's Edge. Please join us at unfilteredinvestor.com. Bobby and I and Mike Arnold. I think you'll really enjoy it. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jim Euro. That's Bob Iacino. And that's Dr. Philip Ovadia. Haley, you there?